Hello, loves. I think I'm live. The circle is still spinning. Let me know. I think I'm now live. Yay. Facebook has a new live platform. I can no longer go back to the old platform that I know that works. So, anyway, onward. So, I'm trusting that this is functioning. If you are watching this, please do send me some hearts or some thumbs up and a comment, please, so I know that this is actually working. If you don't know me, Jenn Plotnikoff, fear alchemist and self-healing expert, and I was just inspired. I think this is going to be a short little live. I'm just going to move my feet here. Let's just get more comfortable, shall we? Because this is a little conversation. Hey, Rachel, I wanted to have a little heart to heart with you about desire. And you know, this has kind of been in my spirit for a long, long time, but something that I was really reflecting upon, and I might even read this to you. I wrote this down of something that I feel is I see is resonant. I know it's definitely resonant in my own life, and I see it in a lot of different people. And it's something that I remember I shared, and I will share this story with you. I had an interesting experience like last week, I think it was, surfing actually, and I was surfing by myself, and I just had one of those moments. I'll call it like my matrix moment where time slowed down, and I actually witnessed myself doing this of what I wanted to talk to you about today. And it was both surreal and it was really interesting because I simultaneously was like watching myself go through this process, wanting to make a different choice, but not making a different choice in the moment. And it was so surreal because time literally slowed down. And what it was is this kind of belief that often we carry where you are only allowed a certain amount of, you know, joy, happiness, whatever it is, and it's not okay to want more, that it's somehow selfish to want more. And so in writing this, I realized that we all have, if you've ever read Gay Hendricks' book, The Great Leap, he talks about this, he calls it the upper limit problem, or ULP, but really it's not about the superficial stuff. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, because I think when it comes to right now we live in a culture that superficially is very desire driven, but it's superficial desires. I don't want to talk about superficial desires right now because those are the things that we think we want, but they're not actually even touching or even coming close to what our deep soul yearnings are. And most of these things, we have such a strong belief that they don't exist, or we're not worthy of them, or a lot of times it's we don't even think that we tell ourselves that these things aren't possible so that we're not disappointed of when they don't show up. And we actually fabricate, we can call this playing small, whatever, but we actually fabricate situations to ensure that they don't show up. We might identify this with settling. So for example, I had a really interesting conversation. Last couple of weeks I've been going back and forth with a friend of mine, and we were talking about relationships, and we we're talking about this idea of, you know, we write down these lists of things, of people that we want in our lives, whether that be a romantic partnership, whether that even be friendships, the type of people, you know, you say, we say, they say that the 5 people that are in your innermost circle are those people that reflect how you show up. And so what I find really interesting is when we look at that, it's like, who do we choose? Who do we allow to be in that sacred inner circle? Is it the type of person that feels safe, that doesn't push us to really rise to some of those scary desires? Or are there people in that circle where you're like, wow, that's incredible what they are doing in their lives and the way that they are being? And so again, I want to get away with this, get away from this idea of superficial desire. And I just kind of want to point out what I mean by that, because, what I see in the self-development industry, what I see in the coaching industry, business and spiritualism, is we're kind of in a place where we are desiring maybe, a bigger house or more money or, some hot relationship or a different relationship or a different way of being. And these are actually what I'm calling superficial desires, because they're important, and then they're like a reflection of something that's much deeper. But that thing that's much deeper is the thing that often we hide from ourselves because we think that it's not possible. So even though we think, oh, having, a six-figure business or whatever, or having this gorgeous house or whatever it is, or this incredible vacation or experience or whatever, whether it's whatever it is that we're desiring on that 3D superficial level in our lives, in some way is connected to kind of a deeper, more important desire that we're not allowing ourselves to feel. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is it's something that's coming up in the collective field, and it's something that I led a full moon guided ceremony with my women's circle last night. And one of the things that came through in the channeling was this connection to deep yearning and deep heart desire. And the heart, our heart, let me tell you, it is not just an organ of circulating oxygen through our body, but it's also the organ that carries and holds our most tenderest desires, the desires that we came here on this earth to fulfill. And so it's this incredible space. It's so patient. It's so patient because it's just waiting for us to say yes. And often these desires, and I'm going to give you a couple examples. For me, one of them that came up was this, I'm going to get personal with you. For me, it was this desire for this deep love and connection with another human that is interesting, because I have had this experience in my life, in my circle. I've actually manifested and created it. But what I realized that the full enormity of this desire is so kind of big and bodaciously scary and sometimes overwhelming that I will kind of settle for a different form of it in some ways. Or in this case, when it was in my field, I felt like I needed to sacrifice something really important to me in order to have it in exchange. There was this sense of such discomfort of actually receiving what I truly deeply wanted on a soul level that it actually felt really uncomfortable. And so this is what happens. This is what happens when we actually work with this place. But this is the other thing, is that when we don't admit to ourselves those deep desires, and they're there, and it's funny because we can push them, and I have myself, we can push them underground, and we can tell ourselves and logically convince ourselves and take ourselves on all sorts of crazy adventures and journeys, both mentally, physically, spiritually, in all the different ways, in order to kind of avoid the pain. And it can be very painful to sit with the realization that we have these desires, that we have these wants, and they are beyond a relationship or a house, or they are beyond what we are often working to ourselves in the 3D, in the physical world. And so I just wanted to invite you. There's a couple things. One is just to sit in the tenderness of your own desires that you might not even be aware of, because often what happens is, and we're trained from such a young age, no matter if you were a woman or a man, we are trained at such a young age that what we truly, truly want deep down inside just doesn't exist. And so we can't have it all. And so we need to find an alternative. And, you know, this is manifested for me not just in my truest, deepest soul desires, but even when it comes to the more superficial desires, this pattern emerges. It's the pattern where you really want the thing on the menu. Maybe you want the steak. You really want the steak, but you follow the logical voice in your head that says, oh, that's not very healthy and blah, 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 blah. Like, this is a small example. And I know it is an example of the superficial, but remember I said the superficial is connected to that deeper longing. This is something actually I'm noticing in one of the clients that I'm working with right now too, and we're having this conversation about when we kind of connect to this place, and there can be ups and downs because we're unraveling a place that exists within us, that has always existed within us, but that we've spent almost our entire lifetime trying to avoid because we believe it's painful. And in a way, it can be sometimes. Oh, hello, Sharon Lee. I hope that you are resting, retreating well. Thank you for joining me, for all of you who are joining me. I also am really curious about how this is shown up for you. And it might be small things. And I find it often is, I mean, I joke about the steak. Well, not really a joke. It's serious. But, often I find myself in this pattern where there's something that I really, truly want. And there isn't a logical reason for that. Maybe it's something specific. Maybe it's something I need, perhaps, for example, I journal a lot and I channel a lot through words. And so I buy a lot of journals, and I'm really specific about the type of paper and the way that it feels and all these different little things. And I caught myself about a month ago when I was in need of a new journal. I caught myself kind of feeling like I could just go to any corner store because the journals that I love are like next to impossible to find here in Mexico, which is where I am. And I was running out of pages and I needed more. And so I was like, I'll just get something in the meantime and meantime. And just something inside of me was just like, no. And interestingly enough, thank you, Amazon Mexico, because I ended up finding the journal that I love. I love Moleskine journals, for anyone who loves journals. I don't know what it is. And yes, they are not cheap, but at the same time, it was just so important, and it felt so wrong in a way to deny that yearning. And the reason why I'm telling you about this is it's not really just about a journal. It's about how we deny those deeper yearnings of our body. It's how we become disconnected from our body. It's how we fall into a state of health and being in our body. It's how we fall into states of being in relationships that don't feel good. It's how we fall into a state of not having the difficult conversation that you need to have with the other person, whether it's a friendship or family member or your partner or your child. it's falling into these patterns because we're not quite able to sit with these deep desires. And so there's a couple things that I just wanted to offer you in these weeks, however longer we have in our not so self-imposed retreat in our homes. But just inviting, whether you meditate, whether you journal, whether you just go for a little walk or garden or spend some time with yourself, I invite you to take this time, this really precious time, to have a conversation with your own heart. And this could be as simple as just going into a quiet space in your own home and just bringing one or both hands to the heart and just feeling your breath, feeling your own pulse, feeling just the physiological sensations, and just spending 5, 10, maybe 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be, but we have time right now. So I just invite you to take the time and sit with your heart. Allow yourself just to ask. You don't have to come up with the answer. And actually, I invite you to not look for an answer. I just invite you to sit in that liminal space. I have a really dear friend who passed a few years ago, and she was an architect, and she used to talk about this concept of liminal space. Liminal space is transition space, and it is a physiological space. So when you walk into a room in a house, there is this space before you're in the intimacy of the space, but you're not at the threshold. So I invite you to sit in that threshold space, the space where you're not quite arrived in the intimacy of arriving of the deep, deep desire. Maybe it arrives there to you. Maybe it just floods you, and that's okay. But I just invite you, rather than chasing it, rather than drawing it out, sitting with just the possibility, inviting it, and just listening. Just listening, just being in a space of curious listening. Just curious listening. Being open to what shows up, what arrives, how it arrives. That liminal space is what gives us the possibility to witness the magic of our lives unfolding. But we have to be willing to. It's not always a comfortable place. It's that in between. It's that river of sticks. And I just invite you to find a cozy physical space, get physically comfortable, and sit there for a few moments in that possibility, invitation, curiosity, and see and feel into what's there. What's there? My dear lovely ones, I'm just going to check into the comments here. Sharon Lee says she's having a delicious sounding grilled tuna steak. That's like my favorite thing in the world, and salad. And you hesitate to buy it because tuna expensive, but then yes, enjoy. I love that too, because actually this is something that came through in my morning musings and meditation of the day. It's this idea of satisfaction, and how much satisfaction can I allow myself? This aligns very much to cultivating a relationship with these deep desires and satisfaction is really a curious thing, because this is the thing is, often when we come into the superficial desires and those superficial wants, even for big dreams, whatever it might be, we lose touch of the everyday interaction that we have with our true deep desires. And It can be as simple as enjoying a really delicious tuna steak. It can be that simplicity of just being in the space that you've created. It's being in a clean home. It's having done the dishes and the satisfaction of just being with cleanliness and clean energy. It's maybe the satisfaction of just sitting with your own energy, reading a book, or just enjoying a really delicious cup of coffee. And choosing a place and space in your home or around your home to enjoy that coffee. Just so simple how we can cultivate the energy of satisfaction, satisfying those smaller hints of the longings that tie into, that tether us down into like an umbilical cord to the core essence of those much deeper desires. And I feel like it's very important to enrich those little threads because they may be tiny, but they're very potent and they connect us and feed into those deeper, deeper longings. And those deeper longings, we need to honor them, whether we choose to do nothing or whether we choose to do something. But to not witness them is a very painful experience. It is an experience of suffering here. So I really just invite you just to play, just to kind of allow yourself to, what if you followed really what you were called? What if? What would your life look like? What are the choices that you would make? How would you eat your meals? How would you speak to your partner? How would your friendships look? What kind of those 5 people that are closest to you, who would they be and how would they be? How would they receive you and how would you receive them? So my dears, I think it's Friday. Yes, it's Friday. Happy Friday. Happy weekend. Let me know in the comments if you're watching this in the replay, if you're contemplating this and you want to come back and share something. I would love to hear your shares, your experiences, and if you're brave enough, your witness your deepest desires here. Hello to everyone who's joined me. Hello, Eileen, if you're still here. I just saw your comment there. And it's a pleasure and honor to know you all. Mwah. Ciao.